Hi, I'm Lark, and my mom once called me a useless burden. She didn't know I was still on the line when she said it, calmly, like it was a fact she'd always believed. They used my money to pay their bills, threw parties in my house without inviting me, and even tried to steal the deed right out from under me, all while smiling in family photos I wasn't cropped into. But I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I sold the house they thought was theirs. What kind of mother calls her daughter a burden, then expects her to keep the lights on? And what happens when the burden stops carrying everyone else? I was sipping lukewarm coffee, the kind that had sat too long, but you drink anyway because it's comforting when I saw the post. Megan had tagged Mom. There it was, one of those so blessed family announcements that looks like it was crafted by a PR firm instead of your older sister. A smiling photo of her kids, balloons, and the caption, "Can't wait to celebrate Mom's big day with everyone who matters. Family first, always." I stared at it for a full minute before the cold from my mug finally hit my hand. Then I noticed something even more jarring. The house in the background? My house. The porch railing I'd paid to have replaced last spring. The garden I'd personally restored with drought-resistant flowers. All of it, mine. Except apparently, I didn't exist. No invite, no text, no, "Hey, Lark, we're doing something for Mom next week, you in?" Nothing. And yet, they'd used my home, as the venue, as if I was a ghost who conveniently paid the mortgage, but didn't require acknowledgement. My thumb hovered over the screen. I almost clicked into the comment section. Almost typed something dry and civil like, "Let me know if I need to unlock the side door." But I didn't. Instead, I locked my phone, stood up from the bar stool in my tiny kitchen, and walked out to the backyard. The breeze was warm, the silence louder than it should have been. It was the kind of quiet that doesn't soothe. It stings. Later that evening, I got a voicemail. My phone had buzzed during dinner, and I hadn't picked up. The message had been left at 7:41 p.m. I hit play. At first, it was just static and a bit of background noise. Then I heard Mom's voice. "Let's not tell Lark," she said. A pause. Then a muffled chuckle, probably Megan's. She always makes things awkward, so bland, such a burden. The word sat on my chest like a stone. Burden. Casual, effortless, like a fact they both agreed upon without the need for justification. I didn't cry. I didn't call back. I just replayed it. Once, then again, and then I saved it. Titled it, Evidence. If I was a burden, I figured I might as well carry something heavy, like responsibility, like ownership. 2 days later, I stopped by the house to drop off a package, and Amazon returned Megan had shipped to my address without asking. Again. When I punched in the gate code, it blinked red. Incorrect. I tried it again. Same response. I knocked on the front door, waited. I could hear movement inside, laughter, faint music. No one came. I leaned slightly to peer through the side window, and that's when I saw it. A banner strung across the living room mantel. Family means never having to say you're sorry. The irony almost made me laugh. I stood there for a moment, debating if I should knock again or just leave the box by the door. I left it, then walked back to my car and sat behind the wheel, staring straight ahead. People think hurt always looks loud, yelling, throwing things, dramatic exits. Sometimes it's just quiet. It's letting your hands stay still in your lap when they want to grip the steering wheel tight enough to leave marks. It's realizing you're not angry because you were forgotten. You're angry because you were erased. I didn't go home right away. I drove around the block twice, past the house again just to confirm it was real, that I hadn't imagined the whole thing. But it was real. That was the night I realized they hadn't accidentally left me out. It wasn't a scheduling error. It wasn't a missed call. It was deliberate, intentional erasure. I parked outside a gas station just a few blocks from my apartment and sat in the dark with the engine off. I wasn't thinking of revenge. Not yet. But something had cracked. And once something cracks, even if it doesn't shatter right away, you can't pretend it's whole. I thought of that voicemail, thought of the word burden again. The worst kind of loneliness is being surrounded by people and still feeling invisible. I smiled in the rearview mirror, gripping the steering wheel tighter than I meant to. If I was a burden, it was time I learned how to lift and let go. I drove straight to the bank that morning, just like I said I would. No makeup, hair still damp from the shower, a quiet determination in my chest. I wasn't thinking about revenge. Not exactly. I was thinking about leverage. How much control did I actually have if I stopped handing it away for free? As I waited in line, I started tracing it all back, when the switch really flipped. It was subtle at first, as most betrayals are. They don't come swinging through the front door. They slip in quietly through memories. A few months earlier, Mom had tweaked her back, reaching for a cereal box. Nothing serious, just a pinched nerve and a prescription for muscle relaxers. I wanted to help, not for praise, just out of habit, maybe. I ordered a luxury massage chair, something ergonomic and fancy enough that it would feel like love. It arrived on a Friday. That Sunday, Megan's crew came over for their usual family day. Her husband brought store-bought potato salad, and her kids ran through the house like caffeine in human form. I stood by the kitchen island, sipping iced tea and watching as Mom motioned to the chair. That? Oh, Megan got it for me. So thoughtful, she gushed, smiling in that exaggerated way she does when guests are watching. My glass didn't shatter, but I imagined the sound it would have made if I'd let it drop. No one looked at me. Not Mom, not Megan. The chair sat there like a trophy, and somehow, I'd been written out of the game. My name erased from the plaque. Later that evening, after everyone had left, and I helped clean up as usual, I asked Megan about it. Calmly. Casually. Why didn't you correct her? She shrugged, drying a glass. I figured she forgot. Why make it awkward? I stared at her. You know exactly who bought that chair. Megan smirked. Yeah, but you know how Mom is. She likes neat stories. I didn't see the point in confusing her. I nodded slowly, lips tight. So she just decides who gets remembered, and you go along with it. I didn't say that, she replied, placing the glass on the rack. You're reading into things again. I went home that night and stood by my own dining table. No chairs around it, because I lived alone and rarely entertained. The silence was thick. It wasn't the money that stung. It was the rewrite. Months later, Thanksgiving rolled around. I debated skipping it, but guilt has a way of dragging you places even your common sense says to avoid. I arrived with a homemade pecan pie and a bottle of wine I couldn't really afford. The house was already buzzing. The dining table was dressed like a magazine spread. 8 seats, 8 name cards. But there were 9 of us. Mom greeted me last, a quick side hug and a glance at my pie. Oh, lovely. You brought something. Just set it in the kitchen. When we all moved toward the table, she looked around, then smiled at me. Lark, sweetie, would you mind sitting at the kitchen bar? You're always so low-key. You don't mind, do you? The others laughed. Someone muttered, Classic Lark. I smiled tightly and sat on the bar stool. The pie was passed around. People commented on how good it was. Where'd this come from? Someone asked. Trader Joe's, maybe? Megan guessed, and the conversation moved on. I sipped my wine slowly, the glass cool in my hand, my back facing the main table. I wasn't mad, not in the moment. I was just elsewhere. After dessert, while they started a board game, I slipped out quietly. My footsteps barely made a sound on the porch I'd paid to rebuild. The air outside was sharp, cleansing. My car beeped as I unlocked it, the only voice to answer me that evening. As I pulled away from the curb, the quote came to me unprompted. It's not about the seat you're given. It's about whether you were counted at all. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet, but not the good kind. The kind where even your thoughts echo back at you like strangers. So I got up, walked to the drawer by my desk, pulled out the receipts, crumpled, faded, some printed from old emails. I flattened them on the surface one by one. The the chair, the roof repairs, the last-minute birthday dinner I paid for but didn't attend, the pie ingredients. I started a new folder on my desktop, just in case. 3 years' worth of bank statements, 6 years of Venmo screenshots, and one growing realization. This wasn't neglect, it was a system. A neat, comfortable system designed to benefit everyone but me. I had never intended to become the bank of the family, but somewhere between "can you spot me this once" and "we'll pay you back next month," I'd become the invisible investor behind every emergency, every birthday, every bill. So I decided to treat it like what it was. Business. I spent the entire weekend at my desk. I labeled folders on my computer: utilities, tuition, medical, repairs, color-coded, time-stamped, archived. Not for revenge, for clarity. Because clarity had always been my currency. I just didn't realize how little anyone else valued it. Neglect is random. This was deliberate. I remembered the launch of the second Routier's Delights bakery location. 2 years back, maybe more. The one I had financed quietly after Mom hinted that Megan and her husband were struggling to cover startup costs. I had wired $42,000 without fanfare, trusting that doing the right thing didn't need applause. The grand opening was a crisp spring afternoon. Balloons, local press, a table of free mini scones. I stood in the crowd, not expecting recognition, but also not expecting to be ignored. Mom gave a speech, classic Darlie, witty, warm, and rehearsed. None of this would have been possible without my brilliant daughter Megan and her husband Ben. They handled everything, every detail, every ounce of this dream. People clapped, cameras flashed. A woman beside me turned and asked, "Are you with the team?" I gave a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Something like that." Later, when the guests thinned and the trays of pastries were half-eaten, I approached Mom near the counter. "You didn't mention me." She blinked, then gave that airy laugh she used when she didn't want to own something. "It was just one speech, dear. Let your sister have her moment." "My moment," I said calmly, "was buying the building, quietly." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Months passed, holidays came and went, and then the holiday card arrived. A glossy, trifold piece of propaganda. Family photos arranged by occasion. Mother's Day, the launch party, birthdays. I stared at the picture from the bakery event. Everyone was there. Megan, Ben, their kids, Mom in her bakery apron. I was there too, barely. My arm was visible in the far left corner, cropped off at the elbow like a ghost had wandered into frame. I didn't say anything. I didn't ask questions. I just drove to the bakery a week later and stood under that very photo, now framed and hung behind the register. A customer asked the cashier, "Is that your family?" The young woman smiled. "Yes, the core team." I didn't flinch. I didn't roll my eyes. I just turned to her and said, "Apparently not." When I got home that night, I opened my ledger. Page 1, chair, $3,400. Page 2, roof repairs, $6,800. Page 3, Routier's Delights expansion, $42,000. Page 4, Thanksgiving pie, $22,16. Page 5, existence, unlisted. I added a new tab, erased contributions. Some people don't erase you by shouting, they do it by editing. So I stopped sending money unless there was an email trail. I copied every receipt to a backup folder. I stopped Venmoing Megan without a subject line. I documented. I time-stamped. It wasn't paranoia, it was preservation. And when they asked for help again, and I knew they would, I wanted a receipt ready. A few days after I started tracking every transaction, like evidence in a trial, the mail came. It was a pastel pink envelope, the kind you'd expect to hold a birthday card or a cheesy family newsletter. Inside was a floral note card, roses and doves, and a folded legal document tucked behind it like a bookmark no one wanted to find. On the front of the card, in my mother's looping cursive, were the words, "Just a little favor, honey. Love, Mom." The document was a formal request to transfer the house title, my house, into her name. Temporarily, it said. For tax optimization, it claimed. I didn't even finish the second paragraph before I knew what it was. I didn't respond. I didn't call. I just placed the card on the dining table and stared at it through dinner, like it might start speaking. It didn't. But the text came later, from Megan. Just sign it, she wrote. It's all routine. You're still on everything spiritually. You know that. Spiritually. I wasn't sure if I wanted to laugh or scream. The next morning, I took the document to a real estate attorney I'd worked with once before, back when I refinanced the property. She read it carefully, then looked up at me with the same expression doctors use before they deliver bad news. This isn't temporary, she said. Once you sign this, it's not your house anymore. Legally, emotionally, financially, you're out. I sat there for a moment, numb. Then I nodded. Thanks, I said. That's all I needed to know. On the drive back, I rolled down my window and let the wind hit my face like a slap. At a red light, my phone buzzed. Mom. I let it go to voicemail, then listened once I parked. You don't need all that responsibility, honey, she said, her voice sugar-coated like always. Let me take care of it for a while. You don't really need a deed to be part of a family. I hit It started with brunch. Not the warm, fuzzy kind where someone makes waffles and people show up in pajamas. No, this was the performative type. Table runners, matching napkins, monogrammed mimosas. Megan's idea of low-key. There were cousins I hadn't seen since high school, Mom's church friend with her judgmental smirk, and Ben trying too hard to keep the kids off their tablets. When I walked in, Megan barely looked up from rearranging deviled eggs. Hey, grab a drink, she said, motioning with her elbow. And do you mind holding Liam for a sec? He's getting fussy and I've got egg on my hands. I took the baby without hesitation. He's never been the problem. I bounced him on my hip as people filed into the living room. That's when I noticed the new chairs. 12 of them, sleek and expensive-looking, arranged around a massive farmhouse-style table. And one of them, near the head of the table, had a card taped to the back, reserved. Darlie, adjusting her pearls like we were hosting diplomats, clapped her hands. All right, let's gather. Grandma's seat is ready. Don't touch it. Grandma, who hadn't come to a single gathering in over a year. I stood there, holding a squirming toddler, while everyone else took their assigned seats. 10 minutes into brunch, my arm went numb from Liam's weight. I leaned over to Megan and whispered, Can I sit now? She gave me a look, half annoyance, half confusion. It's just a chair, Lark. Why make a thing out of it? I said nothing, just rocked Liam gently while my thighs burned from standing. It wasn't the chair. It never was. It was that no one thought to offer me one. They offered me a job, a baby, a task, not a place. I stayed through the toast, through the overcooked quiche, through the polite laughter when Darlie praised Megan's hosting instincts and winked like it was all so charmingly accidental. After brunch, I helped clean up. No one asked. I just did it, like I always had. Driving home, I couldn't shake the weight of it. Not Liam. The moment. 2 days later, the local paper published a glowing feature on Mom's bakery. The headline, Vision, Flour, and Family. How One Woman Built a Legacy. It had Megan's photo right below it, flour on her cheek, laughing. She looked radiant, camera ready, hand-picked. The article quoted Darlie. We couldn't have done it without our oldest. She's been the light of our lives, our rock through every recipe. I sat in my car in front of the bakery I'd helped fund, a building that wouldn't exist without my money, my paperwork, my trust. My name was nowhere in that article, not even a passing mention. It's one thing to be forgotten. It's another to be rewritten. I went inside, ordered a tea I didn't want just to stand under the framed copy of the article, now hanging behind the register. A customer looked at it and asked the clerk, Is that your family? The girl smiled. Yes, the core team. I replied before I could stop myself. Apparently not. The girl blinked, confused. but I just took my tea and left. Back in my car, I opened my phone and started taking screenshots, old emails, payment transfers, photo timestamps. Every time I paid for something, signed something, gave something. I created a new folder on my desktop, erased contributions. Then I called my assistant at work. "Can you find me a good trust attorney?" I asked. She paused. "Of course. Is something wrong?" "Not yet," I said, "but I plan to fix that." That night, Megan Venmo'd me $10 with a note. Babysitter tip. I didn't blink. Just screenshotted it and marked it Exhibit A. The next morning, I dressed like I was heading into court. Black slacks, low heels, no jewelry. I wasn't walking into a battle, but I wasn't walking in soft either. The trust attorney's office downtown had a view that felt almost smug. Expensive art. Quiet, cold air. A secretary who never blinked. I laid 3 folders on the polished table. One labeled Contributions, one Transfers, and the third, Communications. The attorney flipped through them in silence, then tapped a few keys on her keyboard. A pause. Then, "Did you know your name was removed from this joint account last quarter?" My spine didn't move, but something in me did. "No," I said, "I didn't." "You're not a co-owner anymore, just a ghost on the transaction history." Her voice wasn't cruel, just factual. I looked out the window. "So I've been paying for things I technically don't own?" "You've been funding what you don't control," she replied. I exhaled slowly. Then I'll start owning what they don't expect. She gave a nod, subtle, professional, like someone used to watching people shift from naive to calculated. That evening, back home, I opened the mail and found a credit rejection letter. From a credit union I'd never contacted. Denied. Cosigner declined. I stared at the letter until my eyes burned, then made some calls. 30 minutes later, I had my answer. Darley's business had attempted to apply for a commercial equipment loan. I was listed as the guarantor. I called Megan. She answered on the second ring, voice casual, like nothing had happened. "Oh, that? It was just an idea. Thought it might help approval. You've got better credit than Mom." My voice was steady. "So you used my name without asking?" She laughed like I'd told a joke too seriously. "You weren't going to say no. Besides, it didn't go through." I hung up without another word. Then I printed the rejection notice, filed it into my violations folder with the caption written across the top in bold ink. If I'm just a name to them, let's see what happens when I take that name back. The next day, I went back to the attorney. "I want to transfer the house into an LLC, quietly, and I want everything they've touched scrubbed from my ownership profile." She blinked. "You're sure?" I looked her dead in the eye. "I'm done being convenient." By Thursday, the documents were drawn. By Friday, the LLC was registered. The property, my home, was now owned by a structure they couldn't trace. The real estate listing was ready. And I didn't tell a soul. They were planning a trip to Europe, Rome, Paris, Venice. I saw the group chat screenshot Megan accidentally sent me. "Lark doesn't need to come. She never enjoys anything." I didn't reply. But inside, something steady and unflinching settled into place. They thought loyalty meant silence. That because I stayed, paid, and smiled, I'd keep doing it. But loyalty without respect is just exploitation in better lighting. By Friday, the LLC was formed, the trust was signed, and the real estate listing was ready. All I needed now was a goodbye they'd never hear. It came as a group text, a cheery little update buried between photos of croissants and Megan's latest manicure. "We're planning a Europe trip, Paris, Venice. You're welcome to join if you want. No pressure, of course. We'll cover our own costs this time." I stared at the screen longer than I should have. The same group that forgot to invite me to my own house for Thanksgiving had suddenly remembered I existed. It wasn't warmth. It wasn't inclusion. It was strategy. Keep the burden close enough to feel useful, but far enough not to share credit. And yet, this time, they'd handed me a window. A wide, perfect window. I didn't respond. Instead, I pulled out the refinancing documents I'd been meaning to review. The ones Darlie had asked me to glance over last fall, before she ran off to get a notary. I scanned the pages slowly, noting one signature, mine, and a line that read, "Collateral assignment of property for disbursement." Then I flipped to the last page. Disbursement amount, $28,500. I closed the file, picked up my phone, opened Instagram. Megan had already posted a teaser from a travel blog, "Living Our Best Life, Family First." I screenshotted it, renamed the file, "Vacation Paid by Burden." The next few days passed in a haze of silent movement. I made lists, called the realtor, donated the furniture. Movers came and went, loading up decades of decor and drama into a truck that said Charity Logistics on the side. My neighbors assumed it was renovation. One even said, "Fresh start?" I smiled. Something like that. By Wednesday, the house was nearly empty. I walked barefoot across the hardwood, listening to the echo of my own footsteps in a home that never really had a place for me. The last thing I packed was the photo of my dad from college. He wasn't part of this story, not really, but he'd always looked at me like I mattered. I wrapped the frame in an old scarf and placed it in the front seat of my car. Then I went to work on the rest. I closed all joint accounts. Every link they had access to, gone. I set up automatic email filters to trash anything with Mom or Megan in the sender name. I called the alarm company, changed the passcodes, had the locks rekeyed, and I left one thing behind, a sticky note right in the center of the front door. Surprise! This is what a burden can do. It was surreal. How quiet it was when it was all done. No slammed doors, no tearful monologues, just a slow exhale and the sound of car tires on the driveway as I drove away. I didn't pack a suitcase. I didn't leave a note. I just walked out the back door and left the key on the counter, right next to the title deed, signed, gone. They came back from Paris sunburned, grinning, and entirely unaware. The Uber dropped them at the curb mid-afternoon, the Texas heat rolling off the pavement like steam. Megan stepped out first, dragging her rose gold suitcase across the sidewalk. Darlie followed, moving slower, adjusting her sunglasses and tugging her cardigan over her shoulders like she was still cold from a cappuccino in Venice. "That flight was brutal," Darlie mumbled, eyes on the front door. "Worth it," Megan replied, lifting her phone for one last selfie in front of the house. "We needed this." She pulled out her key and slipped it into the lock. Turned. Nothing. She tried again, jiggled it. "Did you change the lock?" she asked, half laughing. Darlie frowned. "No, I didn't touch it. Try yours." Darlie's key didn't work either. They stood there in silence for a moment. A long, uncomfortable pause that seemed to melt the vacation glow right off their faces. Then Megan noticed it. The sticky note. Bright yellow, impossible to miss. She plucked it from the doorframe with 2 fingers. Read it aloud. "Surprise! This is what a burden can do." Darlie's voice cracked. "Call Lark, now!" Megan opened her phone and stared at my contact. She pressed call. It went straight to voicemail. The neighbor across the street came out to water her plants. She didn't wave. Darlie knocked, then banged, then tried the garage code. Nothing. "Maybe we've been robbed?" Megan said, panic creeping into her voice. "Then why would someone leave a note?" Darlie snapped. They called the alarm company next. Megan tried to use the old access code. It had been disabled. The rep on the phone wouldn't give her anything. She wasn't on the account. Ben called in from his layover, tried to calm her down, offered suggestions like resetting the code remotely. None of it worked. Inside the house, silence reigned. On the porch, the vacation high was long gone. They never expected the softest voice to change the locks. Later that evening, Darlie left a voicemail. Her voice was slower now, more careful. "We're locked out. Was this you? If it is, we need to talk. Don't make this harder than it has to be." I didn't respond. Instead, I opened her last Instagram post, the one from the Eiffel Tower, where she was raising a glass of champagne with the caption, "Still living the dream." I forwarded it to my Exhibit B folder. That night, I sat on my couch, lights dim, watching the voicemail icon blink on my phone. I pressed play. "Lark," she said, quieter this time. "You misunderstood. When I said burden, I meant the situation, not you. It was a moment of stress, and I didn't mean for you to take it that way." Not an apology, not even close, just a reframe, an attempt to undo what had already been done. I poured myself a glass of water, sat in the dark, and listened to the silence that followed her words. At 7:13 the next morning, my phone lit up with 42 missed calls and 3 voicemails. None of them said, "I'm sorry." They all said, "We need you." At 7:13 that morning, my phone lit up like Vegas. 42 missed calls, 3 voicemails. Not one said, "I'm sorry." Every last one said, "We need you." It was always that, never apology, only need. I sat at my kitchen table, coffee untouched, watching my screen vibrate itself off the counter. I didn't answer, I didn't even flinch. Instead, I grabbed my keys and drove. Not far, just 2 blocks over. I parked beneath the elm tree that shaded the corner lot, the one with a perfect view of the house they used to call home. They were outside again, same clothes as the night before, pacing, calling, trying to make sense of a reality that no longer included them. Megan was on the phone with someone, probably her husband, voice clipped, lips tight. Darlie banged on the door one more time and tried the key again, even though she'd already tried it 10 times. I sipped my coffee, rolled the window down just enough to hear her mutter, "This can't be legal." She tried the garage code. Nothing. Walked over to the neighbor's porch, rang the bell. The neighbor opened the door just a crack, then shut it quickly after a polite shake of the head. They looked like children locked out of a treehouse. "You built this on me," I whispered, "and now you can't enter without me." It was almost noon when I remembered a detail I hadn't touched yet. I pulled out my laptop in the passenger seat and logged into a joint business account I hadn't looked at in months. It had once been meant for emergencies only, a shared line for the bakery. Darlie had begged me to open it for her 2 years ago when the expansion loans didn't go through. To my surprise, it was still active. Balance, $12,000, mostly my deposits. Forgotten by them, but not by the bank. I moved the funds into my private account and closed the profile in 3 clicks. Gone. They thought I'd be their safety net forever, I said aloud. They forgot I was the one holding the rope. I drove home, poured a fresh cup of coffee, and opened my email. First order of business, cancel their home insurance policy. My name was still on it, not anymore. Next, I deleted myself from their emergency contact lists in the medical portal. Then I called my cell carrier and had both their numbers blocked permanently. Every thread that tied me to their safety, snipped. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt still, like a house with no creaking pipes, for the first time in years. This wasn't revenge, I said, watching the cursor blink on a blank screen. This was redirection, back to me. Later that afternoon, I received an email from a lawyer's assistant. Subject line, misunderstandings and estate clarifications. I didn't reply. I brewed a cup of tea, sat by the window, watched the steam curl into nothing. Then I shredded the letter. They tried again. This time with softer words. Emails written by assistants. Lines like, perhaps a miscommunication, or misunderstandings surrounding estate intentions. I brewed tea, read it once, and shredded it. What they called confusion, I now called design. What they offered as a conversation, I recognized as strategy. The morning light was low when I drove to the storage unit I'd paid for over the last 8 years. I used to imagine it as a time capsule, things they might want again, things I preserved out of love, out of hope. When I unlocked the unit, my stomach dropped. The shelves were bare. The air inside smelled like sawdust and stale regret. In the corner sat one tattered box with my name scrawled across it in Sharpie. Lark, Old Toys. I opened it. The lid barely clung to the edges. Inside were pieces of a childhood dollhouse, yellowed report cards, broken photo frames with the glass missing. Everything else? Gone. A worker passed by with a clipboard. They cleared most of this 2 weeks ago, he said, glancing over his shoulder. Said it was just junk. Junk. I picked up the box, walked it to my trunk, and drove directly to the landfill. No music, no talking, just wind and silence. When I dropped the box onto the heap, I didn't flinch. I didn't say goodbye. Sometimes healing means throwing away the history they made sure you'd never inherit. A week later, I was driving past the house, my old house, when I saw a locksmith's van parked out front. Darlie was on the porch, animated and flustered. The locksmith stood firm, shaking his head. I parked half a block down and watched from behind tinted glass. She was pointing to the door, explaining something, showing him her phone. He said something back, shrugged. He wasn't opening it. She turned toward the street, visibly agitated, then said something I couldn't hear. Probably another lie. Another claim that the house was stolen. But nothing was stolen. I didn't steal the house. I just took back the part of me they assumed was theirs. Later that day, I logged in to double-check everything. Utilities, closed in my name. HOA records, updated to reflect the LLC I managed. Every bill paid, every thread severed. Then the final voicemail came in. "You'll regret this," Darlie said. "You always were too emotional." I smiled. Deleted it. Then added their numbers to the blocked list and turned on auto-reject for unknowns. Peace doesn't always come in a wave. Sometimes it settles in with a single setting on your phone. It wasn't just the locks I changed. It was the language, from we to me. And I finally liked how it sounded. Megan's text came late. Too late for sincerity, too early for decency. "You're really never speaking to us again?" I didn't reply. Not immediately, not angrily. I stared at the words while the water for my tea cooled on the counter behind me. A second later, a voice note followed. "It's not fair to Mom. She's not well. You're being cold, Lark. This isn't who you are." She was wrong. This is exactly who I am. Or rather, who I'd become. A woman no longer contorting herself to keep others warm. I deleted the message, quietly, then poured the lukewarm water down the drain and started a new kettle. That night, after everything in my apartment was still, after the dishwasher hummed its final cycle and the streetlight outside flickered into life, I sat on my bed and opened the Notes app on my phone. I typed slowly at first, then faster. "Dear Megan, do you remember the Christmas I spent alone? You said the weather was too bad to drive, but I saw the photos later. Your kids in matching pajamas, Mom laughing beside the tree I bought. You tagged me in nothing. I sat at home with the leftovers I'd made for all of you. Do you remember the time the bathroom flooded and I paid the plumber before you even called? The thank you never came. Do you remember asking me to babysit while you got your nails done, telling me I was so good with kids as you drove away without even buckling Liam's car seat? You don't miss me, you miss my compliance." That was the last line. I reread it 3 times, then closed the app. Didn't save it, didn't send it. Instead, I walked to my tiny balcony, lit a match, and dropped the corner of the paper copy into a fire-safe bowl. The flame curled fast. The ashes rose into the dark air and disappeared over the street like a breath finally released. The next morning, there was a card in my mailbox. No return address. The handwriting on the envelope was unmistakable. Inside, a birthday card with daisies on the front. No greeting, no warm wishes. Just a single line, written in Darlie's loopy script. "You always were so sensitive." I laughed out loud, short, dry, a little bitter, then pinned the card to the fridge under a magnet that read, "Kindness is not weakness. Closure is when the apology no longer matters." I updated my emergency contact to a colleague I trusted, removed Megan from the Spotify family plan, deleted the shared grocery list we hadn't used in months, but still sat there like a ghost. Then, I did something small that felt enormous. I went through my phone and turned off every alert except weather. No pings, no dings, no heart attacks from messages that came labeled urgent, but only meant serve us. I thought being needed was the same as being loved. I was wrong. The next morning, I got dressed for a day with no obligations, no requests, no weight. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty for being light. Saturday morning arrived like a breath held too long. The air was calm, still clinging to early autumn's final softness. I made coffee, cracked the window above the sink, and let the breeze settle over my kitchen. It was quiet. Not lonely, just unoccupied. When the mail arrived, I found it among the grocery store flyers and political ads. A handwritten envelope, pale blue, postmarked from the same zip code I'd lived in half my life. No return address, just my name. The handwriting was unmistakable. I opened it slowly, as if the paper might catch fire from the warmth of my fingers. Inside, a single sheet, folded twice. The first line, "You always took things too personally." I stared at the page, then read the rest. "But I hope someday you'll find forgiveness in your heart. Families go through things. We all said things. Maybe we all misunderstood each other. Either way, I wish you peace." No signature, no accountability, not even a hint of ownership. I folded the letter carefully, walked it to the recycling bin, and slid it in between a coupon for 2-for-1 pizza and a flyer for a window cleaning service. When they can't control your presence, they try to rewrite your absence. I didn't save it. I didn't burn it. I didn't clutch it like some buried truth. I just threw it away, because that's where it belonged. Later that afternoon, I finalized the sale of the property's residual title rights to the buyer. I sent a short legal notice to Megan and Darley through my attorney. All future communication must go through counsel. I will not respond to personal outreach. And I meant it. I deleted their emails, removed their contacts, blocked every social account I hadn't already buried. Not out of anger, but alignment. That evening, I walked through my new place, modest, sun-warmed, mine. I hung a framed print in the hallway I'd ordered months ago and never unboxed. It read, "Sometimes peace is what's left after the war you didn't start, but had to finish." A week later, I passed by the bakery. The storefront was faded now. A help wanted sign hung crooked in the front window. Inside, Megan wiped a counter. Her hair tied back, her movements slow. Darley sat by the register, shoulders hunched, staring through the glass like she was waiting for someone to come explain what went wrong. They looked smaller, their smiles were gone. And so was I. I didn't pause. I didn't tap the glass or wave or let nostalgia trick me into compassion. I kept walking. I didn't win because I hurt them. I won because they couldn't hurt me anymore.